What's up, everybody? We are back again. That's right. We are back again with another session, another podcast. This is the Class in Session podcast. I am your host, Logan Taylor, my partner in crime, my co host, Mr. Dontay Hampton. And we got a special guest for you all today. This one is going to be special. Listen, I know I say that all the time because we bring in different walks of life and different people from higher education to preschool teachers and different things like that. But teachers make the world go around. So I'm excited about this one. And Dontay, can you and bring in our special guest, please?
Yes, so we have someone who was born in Chicago, raised in NYC, but she's been in the Maryland area a while. She's like a HBCU advocate. She's worked for multiple HBCUs. She's an academic advisor. She's took over Kentucky, got a master's in Kentucky. She's also got an undergrad at Kentucky State as well. Miss Smith, we're just excited for you to be on for us. Can you just give our audience a little bit more about yourself and just tell them how you even got into education?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, fellas, for having me on here. I do appreciate it. My name is Ahira Smith, and I am an HBCU advocate, as you said. Just to kind of give you a little bit more background about me, I went to the Kentucky State University where I got my undergraduate degree in physical education. K through 12 when PE was still on the rise and everybody loved some gym time. So that just lets you know how young I am. And so after that, I went to get my master's at Bowling Green State University, which is in Bowling Green, Ohio. And that also happened to be in education. I was focusing on recreation and leisure at the time. I wanted to be that of a wellness fitness instructor. I wanted to own my own program and management of, helping people embody good health all the way around. So I've been in education since really undergrad, and how I went from being in school is I worked as a teacher. I was a substitute teacher for about maybe a year and a half or so in the Augusta, Georgia area. And then I transitioned to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was a PE teacher for about a year and a half as well there at a high school in Charlotte. An opportunity presented itself to where they were looking for academic advisors at a college not too far from Charlotte. And I said, you know what, let me go ahead and see what this is about. And it just so happens that the advising role was going to be working specifically with student athletes. And I was like, you know what, let me go ahead. This feels like this might be a good matchup for me. And sure enough, I was very blessed and fortunate to get the role as an academic advisor for student athletes at North Carolina A&T State University. Aggie Pride, shout out to all those Aggies out there. And I was blessed to be there for 5 years. Got to know the layout of the land of Aggie land, and another opportunity presented itself for me to make a transition. I'm still working in the academic advising arena, but just more of a director's role. So again, opportunity presented itself. I put myself out there, and sure enough, I was fortunate to get a director of an academic advisement center, one of several that was on the campus of Delaware State University in Dover, Delaware. Shout out to the Hornets. Hey, y'all. Hornets. And and for 5 years I had
Representing out here,
I'm
ain't you?
just saying, you got Hornets
Representing.
out there,
Okay.
you got Aggie Pride, and then we got the mighty Thoroughbred. I'm all about that HBCU life.
Okay.
And again, I was a director of advisement at Dell State for 5 years, working specifically with a college, which is a college of agricultural and related sciences. So I worked with those who were interested in animal and poultry science, those who wanted to be food nutritional science, pre-vet, just all of the arenas in that of ag and that of you know just wanted to go in an arena that a lot of people don't even think about going into, and we'll talk about that a little later. Then a request was asked of me to kind of help out with a special cohort of students at Delaware State University, which are the student athletes. And because I had years of experience back there, I said, you know what, let me go ahead and I'll help out. And the next thing I know, I was working specifically with student athletes that was majoring in all areas across the campus. And I did that for about 5.5 years. And again, I saw some things that I was looking to make a transition out of higher ed because it got to a point where I was a little tired. I wanted to do something different and something new. So, and there was something that I was seeing, like the maybe the last year and a half, that was really clearly evident, especially with students of young people, which was mental health. And with the pandemic that had impacted everybody globally, there was a lot that was taken upon us as far as grief is concerned and loss. And so, what I'm doing now is that I recently, and I do mean like very recently, I've transitioned out of the higher education arena for the time being, and now I am a certified grief coach who work with people who are navigating on their own journey regarding grief and loss, and helping them find the tools and resources and the skills that they have within themselves to get back to living in the present moment, one breath at a time. And so that's where I'm at right now.
Gonna give you small claps over there,
Thank you.
small claps. We don't want to
Thank
make it
you.
too loud,
I
but
thank you.
that's awesome. That's awesome. It's a big need. Me being a student athlete, as I once was in college, people have no idea how much of an academic advisor is needed,
Mm.
especially when you come in as a freshman, or if you've been there at least 2 years and you're trying to change majors. Like it's a lot that goes on, especially with you traveling and everything. So
Oh God, yeah. You boy, y'all went through it. Y'all go.
so I commend you for that. My question for you is how important do you think advising is compared to, or should I say, what's the difference between academic advising and being a PE teacher? Is the relationship between the student the same, or is it different?
Very different. Very different. So here's the thing. I'm not going to share my age, but I will say the fact that at the time when I was in school, and even when I was starting out in my career, as far as education is concerned, PE had somehow shifted. And what I mean by that, it you started to see a lot of school districts and schools K through 12 that was releasing PE programs. They were cutting the programs out for various reasons. Even that those are the arts, the music, the art programs, because they didn't really they felt there wasn't a need. It wasn't a component per se as far as funding was concerned, as far as bringing the money in. If nothing else, it was more like spending money to keep those things. And so, being a PE teacher, you had the opportunity to engage with the kids K through 12 in different activities. However, because the shift was to exit the PE programs out, if they were to do any type of exercises, I saw a lot of kids that would just be mainly focusing on the basketball, you know, or something that's um, easy, but not everybody's engaged in, So it was definitely something where I know for myself and a lot of my other classmates who were in PE or in that field, we're like, okay, what are we going to do? So, working as an academic advisor, I'm working with them on a mental scale with student athletes that are already in their craft. They're already passionate about their particular sport. So I don't have to necessarily work with the body per se, because that's what their coaches are for. So I'm checking out on that mental plane where their head is at. You know, not at, let's be transparent. Unless you are unless you are a male and you are playing a revenue sport like football and men's basketball, the likelihood of you making coin, especially of this on the same salary level as those other two revenue sports, more than likely you're not going to be getting paid much, or hardly anything on a professional set. And so I felt that it was important that, you always have that plan B. You don't want to, people take a different, they take a dislike to, like, oh, what's an alt or something to fall back on. But I'm like, look, whether you dislike it or not, it's a reality. So I wanted to make sure that if they don't make that camp, or if they're not able to do that draft, you have something to where you can go and get your business degree, or you can go ahead in that field that doesn't have enough people in it to make that paper, because you're still needed. But sometimes there are different elements outside of your conversation with a student athlete that's telling them, oh, you can do it, you can do it. And I'm like the reality check. If you ever talk to any of my former student athletes, they tell you that I'm not the one to play with. I'm like, because for an example, out of the team that I had the pleasure of working with, I was the Medea. So I told everybody what they needed to hear, not necessarily what they wanted to hear. And I always told the parents that, because of the fact is that in this world, especially when it comes to children of color, it's a different roadmap. So it's night and day. It's night and day.
Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry. Wait, sir. I'm hearing some loop in my headphones. It's talking about real. I didn't know if that was something you all played, because I couldn't hear your question at all. I couldn't hear you talk at all, Logan. There's like, I'm hearing real, 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 and I don't hear you at all. Yeah, I'm serious. I can't even hear you, Dante.
I hear it too.
Yeah.
Let me see one second.
Now I don't hear it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly.
Logan, what'd you do?
Yeah, Logan done something over
Logan
there.
done something. Logan, you mess it up for everybody.
Yeah, I don't know what he got
Boo!
going
I'm
on.
gonna
I
take a.
thought it was me.
I thought it was me. I'm like, oh, I thought it was a soundbite. I'm like, oh, I'm real. And then they kept going. I'm like, wait, it's this is not the 5 second soundbite. I'm about to take a sip of water. Never mind.
Yeah, we're gonna have to let him come back
Yeah, we're
in.
gonna have to let him come back in, because he was trying to make fun of me.
Yeah, I don't know what he doing. I was like,
I was like, and then when I saw his mouth move, I was like, okay, this is not part of the stream.
yeah,
Okay.
that ain't right.
So I'm the fortunate one to get all the sound bites like that. Cool. Great.
Yep. So we'll see if he come back. Look like
Hmm.
he trying to come back in here.
No worries, no worries. But did I answer your question though?
Well, yes, for sure. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome.
And like I
So
said, we can edit a lot of this, so it's not
no,
a problem.
no worries, no worries. But yeah, so that's the thing, being a academic advisor in PE is night and day. And in fact, now schools are trying to make an effort to bring back PE,
Right.
because they know that the last 15, actually more than that, more than 15 years, um, there's been a huge issue with childhood obesity. That they're
Mm-hmm.
not really getting the type of exercises and engagement that, unfortunately, we see at a college level. We're like, wow,
Mm,
here you are, maybe 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, freshman in college, and you're dealing with a lot of health issues. You're on six different types of medication.
yeah.
Your weight is, it's pretty large. So, the
Right.
school systems are now trying to bring back what they cut 20 years ago. It's just getting the mindset for them, for young people in particular, to be more engaged outside of that of basketball. That's
Okay.
kind of like the crutch. Everybody goes to basketball, but not everybody plays basketball. So,
Y'all hear
Okay.
me okay now?
Yeah.
yes. What'd you do?
It was listen. So I got a new camera, and I was trying to stream it from my camera
Hmm.
to the platform to give it a
Hmm.
more like bigger and clear picture. And so I was
Hmm.
just like, okay, what's going on? And then I put my shotgun mic on it because it needs to have a audio version to be able
Hmm.
to hear what we're speaking and stuff. And I don't know what happened. So it's okay. I unplugged it. We good. Let's just move forward.
Okay, I'm making sure. I'm just like,
Ah,
Right,
yeah.
like dang man, what he done? He done messed up again.
he
Like, come
did. He's
on,
like,
man.
yeah, he was talking bad about you. He's like, man, this is boot crap.
But yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
too
that.
funny.
I'm that host. I'm that guest. Yeah, I'm a little different.
So funny, so funny. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I wanted to stay. What I was saying was that I wanted to stay right there with the whole Medea dynamic, family dynamic. Like I realized that, especially um in education today, right? Like a lot of kids or scholars or students, what I'm saying, whatever you want to call them, that a lot of them don't have that Medea or that family thing, right? And so I know that a lot of students would gravitate towards you, right? Because not just because of that, but because of, I can tell the loving nature that you have. And it's like, hey, listen, you need to make this happen. Like what you want to do. How are you able to build relationships with those students? Like, what were some of the strategies or best practices and things like that you were able to use?
You know what? I can't even say that it was so much of a strategy. It's just my nature. It's just who I am. Me coming from Kentucky State University, we were a small HBCU, so everybody knew everybody for the most part. We had that family element, and interesting enough, my yeah, I'm a fourth generation of Kentucky State University. So both my parents, my grandparents, and even my great grandfather had went to the school there. And so I had legacy on my back, several folds, just attending K State. And 2 years after I got there, and people knew my father and my mom. But interesting enough, 2 years after I had started at Kentucky State University, my father had came back to the alma mater to teach there. So here I am sitting there. I'm like, Dad, out of all the 3,000 freaking schools in this freaking country, you wanted to come back to where I was. I'm like, is this because I'm your only daughter? I'm the youngest. You didn't want to go where your sons were up at the Northeast. You had to come back here. I said, that's jacked up. But it was a perk because I got to drive his car. I got to have some money when I need to get some dinner. I'm like, Dad, can I get something to eat? He'd be like, yeah, give me something to eat too. I'm like, you want some fried chicken? He'd be like, yeah. So so we had that. So my family was from Kentucky too, but to have my dad there, that was definitely a plus. But even before he got there, I when I stepped on the campus of Kentucky State University, I felt like I was at home. And so for me, that's how I look at it when I work with other students, because I know if my kids were going to college, I want to make sure that they had somebody that was going to tell them what they needed to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear, because I didn't grow up with a mentality or a sense of entitlement. That's millennials, and I'm sorry if y'all millennial. I'm keeping it real. Millennials and Gen Zs feel like a sense of entitlement. I didn't grow up like that, and so I I had to have some real hard conversations about that because the world isn't in an entitlement place, So just depending on the circumstances behind it is going to um it's going to either be that in the Medea where again I'm going to tell you in a manner that's going to be loving, or I'm going to tell you in a manner that's going to be penetrating that block that you may have that you don't want to hear, but it still resonates with you. You may not like what I said, but something my dad always used to tell me growing up, I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong. Yeah. Yeah, I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong.
Wait, run that back because I need to make sure they heard that. Run that back.
Of a saying that my father had passed on to me and my brothers, and even to those students that he used to work with at Kentucky State University. Whenever we had these deep philosophical conversations or just conversations about life, my dad always told us that I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong. And however you interpret that, that's what how it resonates with you. So I noticed that I was doing that more and more when I was talking to students about certain things. I'm like, yeah, you can, if you want to choose to do it that way, go ahead. But then a couple of weeks later, or a few days later, or even a few months later, oh, Miss Smith, you said that. I'm like, I told you, I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong. So, it just really depends on the circumstances in terms of how we are engaging. Um, but at the end of the day, the choice is that on the receiving end. I can only give you so much, but you have to you for me, the two key components when you're engaging with people, regardless if it's an advisor or a student, business partners, even in relationships, whether it's personal, professional, is about integrity and accountability. That's essential. That's what holds me to a standard. So I'm not going to be playing no games like that because this world is hard.
I love it. I love it. That's good. I love that. Oh, that's good. Oh, that was real good. I like that.
Thank you.
What was when you first became working in the higher education space and becoming an advisor? What were some common myths that you heard, or you were just like made you scratch your head, like y'all really believe that?
Oh, yeah. So, one of the common myths that a lot of students came in, they felt that when they graduated, that they were going to get this 75, $85,000 job out the bat. And I had and I said, "It really depends on your major." Not just your major, it also depends on your experience. It depends on what location is, because pays are different on the West Coast versus the East Coast. It's different from the South to the North. You know, I know when I was in North Carolina, being an advisor, I was starting off in the low 40s and I had a master's degree. Now keep in mind this was like a long time ago, but I know good and darn well, even for that amount of money I was making when I first started out, there was no way I could take that back up to the NY. I couldn't take that to New York. Are you kidding me? I'd have seven roommates. You know what I mean? So it just really depends. But that's a misconception in itself that when you're advising the misconception on the students then that they're going to get this job that's going to pay them 75, $85,000 out the gate. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. But as far as the advising world is concerned, that you're going to work with a small cohort of students, that you may have about 75 or 100 students, and that was nowhere the truth at all. I know for a fact I had anywhere between I've seen advisors. Let me just say that. I've seen advisors who've had anywhere of a cohort between 250 and 350. 250 students to 350 students by
Wow.
themselves. By themselves. Depending on the school that you're at, um, for an HBCU or PWI, it differs. I'll be very transparent about that. I know when I was working at A&T, when I first started working at A&T, there was only two advisors working with student athletes. My former colleague, she had football and she had men's basketball, and I had everybody else. So I had softball, I had baseball, I had track and field, I had swimming, I had cheerleading, I had everybody else. And she had the revenue sports. So that's a misconception that all student athlete teams are going to have their own advisor. No, that's not true. That's not true.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of responsibility.
Yes.
Oh, listen, even
Put your
even
cape on.
man, cape, bandana, mask, all of it, man. It was real. Even with me and my other, my recent, two colleagues. We had roughly about 465 student athletes split between three advisors. And truthfully, when you're dealing with student athletes, when you're dealing with 19, I'm sorry, mm, 20. When you're dealing with 20 teams, athletic teams, daggone well, that's a lot for three to handle.
Mm.
I mean, if nothing else, for 20 teams, you need at least eight advisors. At least. And I said at least. But due to circumstances that are beyond a lot of advisors' control,
Right.
um, unfortunately, that's not the case.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's reasons why I had to become Medea. I was angry.
Say say-
I was because
say a lot
again,
of frustration.
man, because my thing is this. I'll tell you right now. When I was when I had recently transitioned out of higher ed, I'll tell you the teams that I had. Just I had. So I had bowling. I had equestrian. Yes, Delaware State University has an equestrian team. Shout out to them. They had equestrian. They had cheerleading. I had softball. I had volleyball. I had women's lacrosse. I had triathlon. Okay. That was me. And so dealing with that, that's a lot of moving parts. So when I have students that make up excuses on why they didn't do what they need to do, you're adding more complications on me. You know, well, did you talk to your teacher about this? No. What you mean, no? Miss Smith, my teacher is giving me problems with this, that, and the other. Did you give them your travel letter? No. Pause. Why not? Miss Smith, I needed to talk to so and so. Um, I need help with my resume. Did you go to the career service department? No. So for us, we wore multitude of hats. So that's another misconception that you're just going to be an advisor, an academic advisor, and that's it. Nope, that's a lie. That's a lie. You're going to be a liaison, not only for the student athlete, but you're also going to be the liaison between the coach and the faculty. You're also going to be offering networking opportunities for the student athletes to hopefully engage in. You are going to be providing tutorials and support services for them. You're going to be that counselor. Even though you're not background's not counselor, you're going to be a counselor. You got some. I've had some kids who've come in who were having literal mental breakdowns in front of me where I had to get up and walk with them to counseling services because they were on that verge. So that's a very big misconception that all you're going to be focusing on is academic advising, and that's not true.
Okay. All right. All right, Lo. You want to take a quick break, so we can, you know, let everybody know what they can do.
Oh, for sure, most definitely. So, guys, listen, Miss Smith, we got to take a quick, 30-second break, and then we're gonna get right back into it. All right.
Okay, sure.
So, guys, listen, this is the Class in Session podcast. That's right, the Class in Session podcast, and we need you all to do three things for us. Are you wondering what those three things are? Okay, well, let me tell you. I need you to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. All right. I need you to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. All right. It takes you under 3 seconds to do all of that. Right. And if you love what we're doing, you like what we're doing, you're supporting the movement, then listen, share this with your network, share this with people that, would love to listen to a podcast about education because we want to add value and be a catalyst in the education space. All right. So again, guys, this is the Class in Session podcast. And again, I need you to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. All right. Back to the show.
All right, Miss Smith, I got a question for you. So let's say you meet the Secretary of Education, and they say, "Hey, you can change anything you want." Can you tell us one thing you would change on the high school level and one thing you would change on the college level academically?
You
Or
mean it? You mean the Secretary of Department of Education?
yes, ma'am.
You want me to talk to her?
Yeah. So if you get to talk to her and she says, "Hey, you got one thing you can change," what would it be on the high school level, and what would it be on the college level?
On a serious tip, I definitely would. I feel much more comfortable talking about them on a college level because that's the arena I've been in for the last 16 years, 16, 17 years or so. So really, you know what? And this actually can go all the way down to K through 12. The money, the money, the money to bring in more people, the money to compensate what we go through, especially K through 12. Because let me be very clear. There was a reason why I got out of K through 12. I saw things that wasn't going to be in my favor. And what I mean by that, by a lot of young people who were angry and upset and felt the need to be in people's faces. I'm cut from a different cloth. I'm old school. I don't play that. So there was a reason why God, the source, the universe, whoever you refer to as a higher power, took me out of that element and put me at higher education. But they need to be, it's about the compensation. You know, people didn't really truly understand what teachers or educators went through until the pandemic hit. So, the money to hire enough teachers, the money to provide the support that they need, um, also to make sure our voices are heard, because as advisors, we are considered staff. We're not necessarily teachers unless we're
Right.
given the assignment to be a teacher. But staff, in my opinion, especially at a higher education level, we run the show. Because without us, there is no connection. We're the
Right.
connection between the faculty and that of the students, or in this case, the coaches. Without us, y'all up y'all up the creek.
Right.
So making sure that the schools have more than enough to provide the services that they need, to have the support, and to make sure our voices are heard without question. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay,
Because
go ahead.
if we stop, sorry, because I'm on a roll. Because
No, go ahead.
if we stop, what we do is, like I said, in higher education, if the staff stop, ain't no admissions getting done,
Mm,
ain't no registration getting done, ain't no financial aid going through, ain't no advising. You know what I'm saying? Ain't no maintenance. We are the glue to universities. We are like our roles as a staff is equivalent to that of nurses. Let the nurses go on strike, see what happens. Let us not show up to work for one day, see what happens.
okay. So I just want to say, like, for everybody out there, like our listeners, our parents, and our first time educators, um, and for people who have kids in college or going to college, please make sure they put an emphasis on academic advisors and how important it is for our youth to take advantage of academic advisors, the advice they give, the resources they offer you. Ms. Smith is telling you right now from experience. She's been doing this over a decade. How important it is, and we all know for the ones that went to college, nobody cares. So if you have an advisor and somebody who's in your corner, is very important. So for all our parents out there that listen, please make sure wherever your child goes to college that they definitely tap in with the advisor. No matter who it is, tap in with somebody who can channel your path just a little bit. That's very, very important. I know for me, my personal experience, I was a walk on at first, and so I had to and so as a walk on, they just pass you by like, hey, you need to go up to here, do your schedule. All the scholarship athletes got their schedule done, and they gave me like a kind of like a blank check almost. It's like, hey, here's some of the stuff you need to take. And then I had to literally figure it out on the back end. And so I was going to all this stuff on my own. Then when I got on scholarship, I had a they took me more serious, but by that time, I had already done it. But shout out to Kim Reese, because she was a lady on the football advisor while I was playing basketball that literally helped me to get navigate through that. But yeah, so side note for everybody, please make sure you tapping in with academic advisors. You got some low? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Miss
Actually,
Smith.
actually, if I can just kind of piggyback on what you said there, Dante,
Mm-hmm.
let me be clear on something for all you all whose kids are looking to be student athletes. Whether you a walk on scholarship, you get your stuff together. Because I'm telling you right now, whatever institution you're going to be at, you got to make sure that they're going to be able to provide you what you need to take it to that next level. But more importantly, who are going to appreciate what you bring into the table. Because I know firsthand, I've seen kids who would work their butt off for whatever reason and whatever sport. And if they don't have the right attitude, or more importantly, they're not doing what they're supposed to do in the classroom, don't get it twisted. They will cut you in a heartbeat. And if it's not because of the image of that particular team, I promise you, the NCAA is not for play. They do not play games. They are very stringent. They are changed the whole system. When my brothers were in college, and they were playing football, they had a 4-year scholarship. That's not the case. These student athletes today get reviewed every year to see who's staying on and who's not, who's going to get full ride, who's going to get partial money. I've sat on conversations with coaches who are asking about how did the student perform, this, that, and the other. And the student might have had a full scholarship the first year, but then because they jacked up or they didn't do what they were supposed to do after that semester, their money might have been cut 25%. So Everybody needs to be on their A+ game, because I promise you, what you won't do, they got 5 other people behind them willing to take your spots. It is not a joke. And when you have to answer to NCAA, as far as advisors is concerned, when we have to answer to NCAA about why you didn't do this, and the coaches have to answer the NCAA as to why you didn't do this, if they find out, I'm telling you, ain't nothing. They wipe you out. On to the next one.
Y'all heard her. She listen. She just gave. Like, she, you hear me? Real talk, straight up, no chaser, all that. Like she was like, no games, right?
Mm-mm.
So let me ask you, Ms. Smith. I think that everything that you've given has been amazing.
Oh,
So
thank
of
you.
course I want to give you your flowers.
Oh, thank you.
Because we do that here on this podcast, just giving educators their flowers because we know how pivotal, how important you all are, not just to us, right? But the next generation and the generations after that, or just the world in general, right? Like if there wasn't a lawyer, I mean, if there wasn't a kid that wanted to be a lawyer, who did they get that from? They got that from the teacher, right? There was a teacher that believed in them. There was a teacher that instilled some confidence, some strong belief, right, for them to be successful. So I just want to give you your flowers and say thank
Thank
you
you. Thank you.
for answering the calling. Thank you for walking out your purpose, as well as thank you for just over these past 2 decades of just loving on these babies. Because I know that it's been a journey, and I know you got some stories.
Bruh.
So I really appreciate it. And just before we get up out of here, I just want to ask maybe one or two more questions.
Sure.
But what is one piece of advice you would give to someone that's wanting to start out in your field, or just in the higher education space, right? They wanted to be an advisor, or they may want to be working in the education space. What is some of pieces of advice you would give to them?
Have empathy. Have empathy. Because you're going to come across a lot of different people who are circumstances that are beyond their control. And if you're going to come in there disgruntled and angry or just collect a check, don't do it.
Mm,
Don't do it. It's not, first of all, going in the education field, and I'm sure you've heard this from your previous guests, but going in the education field, trust and believe it's not about the money. Trust. It's not about the money. It's a calling. It's a calling that was placed on you, that you decided to pick up the mantle and answer. So, but you got to have empathy. You got to have empathy, and you got to make sure that this is truly what you want to do, or you felt the need to do. If you're doing it again because you you you're having a hard time going in the going in the field that you want to go into, but you need to do something to collect a check, don't do it, because you're doing a disservice to them, to the kids. You know, I know for me personally, when I saw things that was shifting within me, that I wasn't really going to be the best that I could be for the kids or for my students or my young people, um, I knew I had to make some changes for me to be in a better state of mind. So I'm like, you know what? This is probably the time for me to leave, because I would have been I wouldn't have been giving my all. I wasn't really happy with where things were going. And it wasn't so much the fact that the students per se, but just a lot of the politics that tends to happen in education, especially in higher ed. I always tell people in a joking manner, but I'm very serious. You ever want to see the politics on Capitol Hill in DC got nothing on what happens in higher ed. Facts. So if you really want to go into this, do your due diligence, do your research, engage with us in the dialogue. Because again, if it's about the money, this is not the field for you. It's not the field for you.
I love it. She said impact over income.
Yeah.
I
And the
love it.
big word empathy, like that.
Oh, empathy. That's
Empathy.
essential. That's essential,
Absolutely.
especially now in this day and age with the pandemic. Because again, what I saw, there was such a huge uptick regarding the mental health of these kids, you know. And there's only so much engagement that we can have like on a daily basis or weekly basis because we've had so many students. But we don't know what these students are dealing with when they leave our doors. I mean, I've had students who were unfortunately in abusive relationships. I've had students that are on different types of medications because, they were diagnosed with different mental health challenges. I've had students that had no place to live, that being in college was a place for them to have a bed at night, to sleep at night because they were homeless. I've had kids that wanted to harm themselves because it was just too much. I've had students who, um, were angry because their parents were getting, because they went off to college and then they just got word their parents are getting divorced. I've had students who were being abused at home, sexually and physically abused at home, and we're trying to figure out where to go on Christmas break or summer break because they know they can't go home or they don't want to go home. So when I say that empathy is essential, it is critical because you don't know what people are going through. They don't know what you're going through. We got to have it. We got to have it.
I love it. I love it. Dante, you got one more question or anything before we close it up?
Um, my only question would be, as far as, because you're talking about mental health a lot, and we know as educators, we deal with a lot. Can you talk about your work-life balance for our educators out there, as far as how you're navigating? How did you navigate through where you are? Because, like I said, we have a lot of people on this podcast that are teachers. We've had admin, we've had principals, we've had kindergarten teachers, we've had curriculum developers, speakers, we've had parents. So, can you just talk about that before we get up out of here? Just so people understand from a higher education what that looks like.
What work-life balance looks like. I'll say this. If you don't speak up for yourself, there is no balance. Let me say that again. If you don't speak up for yourself, there is no balance because we have to be, as much as I was an advocate for my student athletes or my students or whoever I worked with for, I didn't use that same voice. I didn't use that same passion for myself. And because of that, I was heading on a very slippery slope downward in terms of my own well being. It is essential. It is essential. It's important. People didn't probably think about work life balance until the pandemic hit. And now that we're still navigating through the treacherous waters of the pandemic, people are like, look, I need to have this with this. Otherwise, it's not going to work anymore. It's like we got a taste of that good ice cream and you don't want to go back to eating the graham crackers without the ice cream. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things that we have to be advocates for ourselves. We have to speak up as much as we tell our students that you have to be an advocate for yourself in this particular class or for this particular internship or for this particular an interview. You have to be an advocate as to why you are important and why they need you, this that. You have to be an advocate for yourself as to why you need a mental health day, why you need a break, why you got to have a fine balance, why you got to have this off, or be able to take on this. You have no is a sentence. No is very much a sentence. No, you know, because that speaks volumes across the board. So My work life balance did not really take effect until I took a leave of absence from my job because I saw things with myself where I did not want to be a freaking hashtag because I had a stroke or a heart attack at such a young age because I lost so many of my classmates within the last 2, 3 years. And not to sit there and say that they probably didn't say no or that they did say no or try to find that life balance, but by then it was too late. And I did not want to be a hashtag. And the thing is that you got to find that balance because I promise you, if you were to pass on or transition today, I promise you they'll find somebody to pick up that work by the next day or next week. Trust. And that might be thrust on to other people. But I promise you, it's real. I've known people in different industries who had lost a colleague and probably a short time later, if there wasn't a freeze on hiring, the position was posted. Damn. Can we have more than 3 days of bereavement? Please? So you got to be an advocate for yourself to have that work-life balance. I don't care if you are a principal. I don't care if you're a teacher. I don't care if you're an advisor, a registrar, financial aid um, officer. I don't care if you're a police officer, law enforcement. If you do not have that work-life balance, I promise you, your work is gonna unbalance your life.
Thank
That's
you. Like I thank you. Like I truly do appreciate you sharing that. I think it's needed. So for everyone out there, all y'all educators, please make time for yourself. And like she said, you can be easily replaced. So please make sure you're taking care of yourself. And we know that there's a lot of stress upon education and in the educational system. So just please make sure you're taking that time for yourself, no matter what it is. Find a hobby, find something, but make sure you're able to shut it off at some point because we know it can go home with you. Um, it can be with you 24 hours a day. So please find a way to shut it off. All right, go ahead, Lo.
All right, man. Listen, I'm just over here soaking up all the game. I'm just listening. I'm like, ooh, she talking to me. I need to work on some work life balance. Like, hold on now. She at my front door. But no, like Miss Smith, everything that you said was amazing. I do know that you said you were becoming a grief coach, or
yes,
that you are,
I am.
excuse me, you
Mm,
are. So can we
mhm.
touch on that a little bit? Like what made
Sure.
you want to transition to become that? And then also talk about some of the projects you may be working on in that space. If there's any books or anything like that, and then we'll transition the head out.
Absolutely. So I recently became a certified grief coach. Actually, in March, I recently completed my training with that, and I'll be very transparent. I didn't want to do this. Let me be clear. Yeah, I did not want to go into the realm of grief, anything, um, because it felt it was too heavy. I felt it was too dark. Um, but it was a calling that was placed on me from God to pick up this mantle. And how it resonated with me so deeply is so with so as I mentioned earlier, my father was he was a teacher and educator himself, and I was definitely a daddy's girl. I was the youngest of three, the only girl. So my dad and I were like this. And interesting enough, on March 1st of 2018, my father had passed away. And um, and not to say that I hadn't experienced grief or loss before that, but when he passed away, everything that was suppressed up to that time was no longer suppressed. Everything erupted. So I had to deal with things that I had been carrying for years up to that point. So my father passed March 1st of 2018. In 2020, my mother passed away February 27th, 2020. So interesting enough, they passed away very close, almost 2 years to the date. My father's funeral was March 5th, 2018 at 11 o'clock in the morning. My mother's funeral was March 5th, 2020, 6 o'clock in the evening. So 2 years apart, we had our parents' homegoing on the same day, just a few hour difference. And then the pandemic set in. When we laid my mom to rest on March 9th, what happened? March 12th, March 13th, the world literally shut down. So I was sitting in that grief for a very long time by myself. My siblings were back in their homes, and so I had all this on me. Then, when we started going back to work, and I was engaged with a lot of young people who are also dealing with a lot of grief and a lot of losses, and not just them, but just in general, it was it was something that gravitated towards me. Maybe because I'm an empath, I felt it heavily. And so when I started talking to some of my advisors, my own personal coaches, they were like, "You know what? You have a story to tell. You have a gift. This is something that really resonates with you. You should be a grief coach or grief counselor." And I'm like, I don't want to do all that. Look, I'm trying to get through my own grief. I don't want to do that, because one thing that grief has taught me that really is essential in life is that you can't get over it. Nobody can get over grief. You can't get around it. You can't get underneath it. You have to go through it. And I've had a lot of classmates, a lot of friends who lost parents the same year I lost my parents. So when my dad passed in 2018, I knew three people, three very close friends of mine who lost their fathers prior to mine, and I knew four more who passed away after my dad died in 2018. And I was like, what the H is going on here? What is going on? And in 2020, um, I had again, I knew about 7 to 8 people who have either passed away or whose parents have passed away. And for me, alone, in 2020, in January, I lost my step grandmother. My step grandmother passed away on January 15th, 2020. My mother passed away February 27th, 2020. And my uncle, my great uncle, my grandmother's last sibling, he died March 13th of 2020. So I had three people to pass away within 3 months of the first year, 2020. So it was on me. And then the pandemic hit. And then I saw the next 6, 7 people, friends of mine, classmates of mine, who's lost parents. And what compounded their loss was the pandemic. And so they couldn't have the funerals. They couldn't have the traditional funeral settings that I was very blessed to have with my mother. So up to that point, I had a lot of my classmates who reached out to me, and they're like, "You know what, Ahira, I didn't know what it is that you had went through. I didn't get it then. I understand now." And even when they shared that with me, I'm like, "Sis or bruh, trust, you have no idea. You you're getting an inkling of it, but you about to go on the roller coaster ride that you did not want to have a ticket for. Trust." And they still going through it. I mean, right now it's 5 years that my father is not here, and tomorrow's Father's Day. So trust me, my emotions are all over the place. So I had to do something with this. And so, after going back and forth with my personal coaches, my spiritual advisors, I was like, "You know what? Let's do it." Because I felt comfortable in grief. I felt comfortable. I'm able to grief, I'm able to connect with it in a manner to where it's not scary anymore, it's not uncomfortable. I'm able to help other people navigate on their own journey as far as grief is concerned, because we're all going to go through it. We don't know the time nor the day it happens, but we're all going to go through it. Nobody is leaving here without it. So it's important for us to provide the necessary support that is needed when we are on this journey. There are many of us who feel alone when it comes to losing a loved one, especially when it comes to death. You know, um, it is very lonely, even if it's not even death related. There are people who had relationship breakups. There are people who've lost jobs, who've lost homes, who who've lost their own um, optimum health level. There are a lot of people who are still feeling the effects of having COVID. They might have been able to run 10 miles before COVID, and now they're barely able to walk a mile. That's a grief in itself. Everybody has levels of grief. Everybody grieves differently. There's no blueprint to this at all. And again, that could feel very lonely. Me and my role or my vision of what I'm seeing with this mantle that I picked up in my grief coaching business is to make sure that you're not alone as you're walking on this road. So, my journey as far as being this grief coach, it actually started on a podcast. I launched a podcast on March 5th of this year, the day of my parents' homegoing. I launched a podcast on Spotify called "It's Not You, It's Grief," and it resonated with me so deeply. I'm like, I got to launch this podcast. I'm going to talk about my parents, and then it just took off from there. And so every Sunday, on Sundays, at 5:55 p.m., I do my podcast and I talk about the various phases of grief, whether it's dealing with the loss of a parent, whether it's dealing with mental health issues, or talking about sexual abuse, the grief that comes with that. May we focused on moms, because that was Mother's Day month. I had guests on my show who talk about their moms and how much grief has impacted them, especially the fellas, because a lot of times, in the society, and especially in the culture of African Americans, we don't really talk about grief out loud. Those are conversations that we never have, or if we do have them, a lot of times people just say, well, just take it to the altar, and just give it to God. But it's more than that. It's way more than that. So this month is we're focusing on pops. We're focusing on the fathers. I have a special episode coming up tomorrow for Father's Day, where a classmate of mine who was very much his father's son, his namesake, had taught him so much about life itself. And then when his father transitioned, it impacted him in a way that he was not ready for, he wasn't expecting. And it taught him so much, um, as far as being a man and head of the household, that he was able to learn from that experience itself, that it still resonates with him to this day. And his father has been gone for more than a decade. And even on the other side, him being a father, he had his oldest son, his namesake. It's three namesakes in that family. There, he's dealing with his own health battle, and that's been a different type of loss or grief, I should say, in terms of witnessing your child who has a very rare health condition. So for me to be able to provide a platform for people to talk about the various areas of grief, and there's I mean, I can spend hours on this, but it's something that it's passionate for me, it resonates with me. And again, I just don't want anybody be alone while they're on this chapter. They could still they can still learn to move forward with it and get back to the present moment. They just got to have the right support to do so. I'm
I love
sorry,
it.
that was a really long answer, but I
By
just
no means, don't apologize. By no means, it's needed. It's
so
definitely needed. So I want to say thank you for that.
you're welcome.
We're
Thank you for
gonna.
having me. I appreciate it.
Oh man, listen, it's a privilege and an honor. The honor is all ours. We created this platform for educators like yourself to come on and be able to give strategies, practices. Hey, this is what I'm doing in my personal life. Hey, I'm transitioning from education going to here and different things like that. So at the end of the day, we just want to show people, we just want to give people in the education space a voice.
And I appreciate that. Thank you so
And let them
much.
know you matter. At
E-
the end of the day, you do matter.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
All right, guys. So before we get up out of here, Ms. Smith, can you leave our listeners and our audience with a um, piece of motivation and then how they can get in contact with you, and then we'll close it out from there.
Well, first of all, Logan and Dante, thank you guys so much for this. I really am very blessed and I feel very humbled that you guys asked me to come on here and just talk to your audience about the world of higher ed as far as an advisor's eyes is concerned. So I really do appreciate you giving me a platform to be a voice. And again, this is of me. So I want to put that disclaimer out there. This isn't a representation of Delaware State University or or A&T or even that of my alma mater, K State. But this is just of me and of my life experiences and what I've witnessed and what I have been through myself. So this is of me. So I appreciate it. Um, one thing I can honestly say is as we are on this journey called life and we go through the different trials and tribulations that we will be facing, I think it's important for folks to understand that it's important to be as authentic, to be organic, definitely intentional, supportive, and more importantly, safe when it comes to expressing ourselves. I think it's important for us to continue to make sure that we are advocate for who we are, where we are in life. Um, we may not necessarily all agree on the same thing, but we can learn to agree to disagree and still have respect for one another. Whether you're at a PWI, whether you're at a HBCU, whether it's a private or public institution, whether you're in this industry or that industry, profit, nonprofit, whether you are a parent, whether you're a godparent, whether you're not a parent, just be you. If there are ever times when it feels too heavy, know that there is a new day that it will be arising. And as the gentleman had said earlier, you matter as well. We all matter. Every one of us has a role, everybody has a purpose. So just remember you matter. As far as people being able to reach out and contact me, I'm actually finishing up my website. So hopefully I'll be able to launch that within the next few days. But in the meantime, if people do want to reach out or contact me, please visit my podcast, which is on Spotify, called It's Not You, It's Grief. My episodes are every Sunday, launched at 5:55 p.m. I will definitely have contact information. I am also on Facebook with my podcast. It's Not You, It's Grief has a Facebook page. If you need to reach out to me personally, my email address is from grief to life Thorobreds.com. That's the name of my coaching business, From Grief to Life. And it's all one word, the FROMGRIEFTOLIFE at gmail.com. Um, but you can reach me on those platforms on Facebook, on my podcast. And again, my website will be launched shortly. And I'd love to be there to help anybody who is, navigating this journey of grief and needs some support or resources. And even if it's a coaching sessions, I do those too. I coach individuals, groups, speaking engagements. I do that too. So
All right. Well, listen, guys, y'all heard her. Y'all heard how you can get in contact with her. She's transitioning from education to being a grief coach slash counselor. And so make sure that you all tap in with Miss Smith. Make sure you all support her podcast. And if you got any questions with being an advisor, working in the education space or anything like that, reach out to her. She'll definitely give you some game. She got over 2 decades. You hear me? She got over 2 decades worth of game. So,
almost. Don't be throwing me over there with over 2 decades. Come on now.
Almost.
I know
listen,
Almost.
I know the gray hair is fooling. I know the gray hair makes it up. But I'm not there. But I appreciate
almost.
it. Almost, but I'm not there. Trust me. I'm not cashing that Social Security check. There ain't no Social Security check for me.
Nah, she ain't catching. Y'all heard her.
Yeah.
All right. But y'all make sure y'all tap in with her, support her
Thank you.
podcast, reach out to her if you have any questions, or, hey, what about this? If you have any ideas or anything in regards to grief or how to, better support or whatever the case may be, right? Or even how to build empathy, right? Just tap in with Miss Smith and allow her to be able to give you some game. But, closing it out, listen, guys. This is the Class in Session podcast. We want to say thank you to Ms. Smith for the opportunity. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us. We really appreciate you. And in closing, listen, man, I'm sorry. This is the Class in Session podcast. I'm your host, Logan Taylor, my partner in crime, my brother, Dontay. And in closing, like we always say, Y.B.Normal.
When you can be extraordinary.
All right, guys, we'll see y'all next episode. Love y'all. Peace.
Bye, everybody.